Welcome to week 5 of my weekly wrap-up from grad school classes. This is my second semester at Northern Arizona University. I'm getting my Master of Forestry. I'm going over 3 classes: forest insects, ecological economics, which I call EE because it's so much easier to say, and my independent study, which is on food security. So this week in forest insects, we studied what affects populations of insects. We've already gone through this a little bit. You guys remember that the number one regulator of insects is other insects. Also, I think it was last week, we did the motion camouflage with the, let's see, it would be going this way, cut off with the dragonfly. And then we also talked about the parasitoids, and those, when they come out of the insect that they were using as host, almost always kills the insect. And there can be parasitoids on parasitoids on parasitoids, so you get the idea. So those are some of the biotic influences on insect population. Just mention a few others, definitely not completely inclusive, but there would be competition, disease, human, and we affect their habitat, or we can spray pesticides or insecticides, and then there's also the mutualism that we talked about last week, and plant host, the quality of the plant host has an impact on the insect. Then abiotic influences, which would be non-living influences. Some of those would be climate or weather. Now, why would we mention both of those? Well, because climate is over a large area or a long time, and weather is local. And for insects, that can be very micro-local. If you are an insect and you're underneath a rock and it's damp enough and dark enough under there to protect your exoskeleton from dehydration, but then if the sun were to come around on the other side, you could be dead. And then there's fire, precipitation, even a drop of rain can be catastrophic for certain insects. And there's elevation, wind. Of course, if you go outside when it's windy, particularly, I know this from being in the South, the mosquitoes are not out there when it's all windy. So that affects insects' ability to live and eat and reproduce. And then the last one would be UV light. The radiation also affects it. We studied population abundance. And that is, you've got a population, birth coming in, death going out, immigration, IMM, and you have emigration, EM. And that is how you account for all the members of the population. There are a couple of cool reasons to study insects when you're looking at population patterns. One is they have very short generation life cycles. So you know, they some of them can reproduce in 9 days. That's pretty short compared to elephant, which is, I don't even know, a year and a half or something. And the other reason that's interesting to study them is they have distinct generations instead of continuous. And discrete is that they have each phase and they don't overlap. So they have 4: egg, larva, pupa, and adult. They go through a complete metamorphosis from pupa to adult, and that pupa happens to be our word for this week for insects class. Pupa, or pupae for plural, it is often a non-feeding cycle. It is generally a non-mobile cycle, although these are generals, and it is when it goes from a complete metamorphosis from the larva stage into the adult stage. And it is also, as it comes out in the adult stage, that is the first time that the wings appear. Pupa, P-U-P-A, or plural, P-U-P-A-E. Okay, so now in economics, ecological economics, EE, we looked at the 6 design principles. They're too long to discuss, so I'll just tell you, you have to decide, since there's 6, which comes first. What's the order? EE has 3 goals: sustainability scale, just distribution, and efficient allocation. So they present the way to come up with policy priorities is scale has to come first. You can think about scale in terms of it being limited or unlimited resource. We, in the past, probably considered clean air as an unlimited resource, but it is not, because it can be polluted. So there's a limit on the clean air, which puts it into the scarcity category, and that is the basis for economics. And then if it is being polluted, it also starts coming into property rights: who owns the clean air, who owns the dirty air. That leads us to the second, the distribution, and then you have, in that phase, you identify who is actually doing the polluting, and then you have efficient allocations, and that is where policy comes in. And we studied taxes, subsidies, and cap and trade. EE thinks that cap and trade is the best alternative because there's still there's fewer infringements on your micro freedom. One of the things that was fascinating to me about subsidies is you're paying some corporation, we'll go back to the clean air, you're paying the corporation to not pollute. The premises underneath that is that they have the right to pollute, and the only reason that they are not is because they are getting paid to not pollute. So under a subsidy, the basic premise is you have the right to do what you're doing. And I think that was pretty eye-opening for me, particularly in terms of pollution. And also, it doesn't seem like a very good long-term approach to coming up with environmental answers. Let's see, after that we were in class and we had a breakout session. We were each given a group to look at policies. We were looking at carbon credits. And the 3 groups were forest managers, NGOs, and community forest group representatives. The theme that held through for that class, as well as several of these other classes, is if you don't include the community that uses the forest, your policy will not work. So we looked at where would you put the carbon credits, how would you define successes, what are the barriers to it, which policy is best from your group's point of view, and what might be some of the leakages. And a leakage would be, we were looking at carbon credits. My group was the community forest, and we recognized there was illegal logging going on. So if you don't address that in your policy, then, or your implementation of the money that you would receive from the government, then your policy, your plan is never going to work. So the bottom line is, the more your success for the project is dependent on how much control the community retains of their forest. Okay, and the word for EE this week is POLIS, P-O-L-I-S. It is a method of, it's a model of public policy. What is important in it in terms of environmental issues is it recognizes there's not everything is just cold facts, and also there's more than the giver and the target, that there are intermediaries. And in the environmental world, that's really important because there's a lot of NGOs, and they have a huge influence on how a policy is implemented and how you define success. All right, so independent study. We have some show and tell for independent study. This is a little dime-size bag. It's called that, but it's a $10 bag of pinon pine nuts. So I got to try them out. This is one little pinion. I don't know that you could possibly see it. And they're in the shell. What I learned was, see, I don't have the dexterity yet. I cracked it. but I learned the incredible value of mechanical shelling that takes place in the Chinese pine nuts. So there's the little bitty nuts, and they are really delicious, but it's an incredible amount of work, even more so than crawfish. So I happen to be sitting next to a pinyon pine, and this is a pine cone from a different pinyon. This little one, I don't think it's old enough yet to make cones. It's certainly not old enough to have any seeds in it, but here's one maybe you can see. It has the little nut inside there, and then that's what they roast, and they get these. Okay, so that was pretty educational for me to find out how difficult it might be to have pinyons as a food source. But I then went on to study agroforestry, which is a really cool concept. It is where you have trees or shrubs growing along with agricultural products or game or livestock. So for me, that would be it would be game, because the deer and the bear really love these pinyons, but they have radically different digestive systems than I do, because they can scoop up the whole thing and eat all the shells. Then I moved on. One other thing about agroforestry that's cool is it kind of makes a combination of many things that are very important for our lives: food, wood, fiber, clean water. So it's a really cool concept. I'm looking forward to learning more about it. There's not as much going on here in the U.S. as, at least in research papers. There's more in Central and South America, Africa, and Asia, but I did find a few that I'm going to look into for this coming week. Okay, then we moved on to systems thinking, and that is an approach like if you look at a car and it has a bunch of different parts. You don't just fix one part, you have to see the car as a whole. So systems thinking does that with any subject, but in the environmental world, I started making circles to show all the different policies and things that might be impacting food security in the pinon nuts. So that's going to be nice. It will give me a framework to put my research into. It gives you places to be able to identify the barriers and the successes, and places to tweak where you might have the most efficient change happen. You look for patterns and norms, and it's non-linear. It's not just a cause and effect. So I'm excited about that as a framework to study the food security issue. Afterwards, we went on to another subject that I found super exciting, and it is our word for, what's a term for the environmental, it's a term for independent study, and that is multi-species ethnography. And that basically is taking the human out of the center of all the pictures. It's decentralizing the human in stories or in understandings. And part of that is realizing that other life forms are doing things. They're not just sitting there as an object for us to put our management skills onto them. One of the things that is super exciting about that for me is I'll be able to use that as my voice, so I can take the systems thinking as a framework, and then I can do multi-species ethnography as my narrative approach, which will put me being a tree storyteller, which is the whole reason I came to grad school. So super stoked on that. And I have remembered our poem for this week, which is: in the morning sun, snow boldly states its water, glistens, shimmers, shines. So if it's snowing where you are, go outside and play. If it's sunny, go outside and play. If it's raining, put on a raincoat and go outside and play, or wait till it's sunny and then go outside and play. But I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you at Wrap Up 3. Ciao, ciao, ciao.